We were founded in 1791 by a group of Boston men who had lived through the era of the American Revolution. They were determined to preserve the history of that period, and in fact, they were determined to preserve the history of this community. I think it is a mistake to suggest that somehow the American Revolution was a misunderstanding between peoples, divided by a common language. It was not a misunderstanding. We understood very well what we were saying, and we understood that this was, in fact, a fundamental disagreement we had with our English cousins. So there was no misunderstanding, and the language clearly reflects that, because indeed our definitions of liberty, our definitions of natural law, natural rights, our definitions of the rights of the citizen, not subject, but citizen, were clearly different from those that still pertained in England. So we did use different words. We had different definitions, and we were clear on that. I think, if you'll pardon an American bias, I think it was, in fact, the refusal, perhaps the intellectual, the cultural, the political refusal of the authorities in London, of the power elite in London. It was their refusal to recognize these changes in concept which did, in fact, precipitate the American Revolution. The Declaration of Independence is one of the most marvelous pieces of propaganda ever conceived by a politician. It does indeed list indictments against His Majesty. Revolution was an extraordinary thing to do, and our ancestors understood that they needed to explain this extraordinary action on their part to a candid world. And that is what this document is intended to do. It, in fact, does not declare independence. The Congress declared independence on the 2nd of July, 1776. This declaration was approved on the 4th of July, 1776. And so this declaration is intended to explain to the world what had happened on the 2nd of July. Revolutions are marvelous instruments at destroying governments, but rarely do they produce new governments that are stable and long-lasting and preserve the rights of the people. The genius of the American Revolution is that it managed to do that. We managed to come out of that revolution with independence and then to create a new government governed by, founded on our Constitution. This is a copy of the Constitution as reported out from the committee in August of 1787. This particular copy was kept by Elbridge Gerry, who was a Massachusetts delegate to the Constitution. As you can see, Mr. Gerry annotated this document. As the debate went on in Philadelphia, Elbridge Gerry kept careful track of changes that were made, careful track of discussion, and he recorded that here in his manuscript hand on this document. What is perhaps most intriguing about Mr. Gerry's copy of the Constitution is that when it came time for a vote on the document, Elbridge Gerry, the delegate from Massachusetts, voted against this document. And the reason he voted against it is because in its original form, it had no Bill of Rights. Mr. Gerry, as were many Americans, is deeply concerned that this document gave too much power to the government and that that government might likely invade the rights of the people. Gerry would later be satisfied because immediately following the ratification of this Constitution of 1787, a Bill of Rights was added. And Mr. Gerry would later become Vice President of the United States, fully recognizing then the value of this Constitution. But this is the ultimate result of the revolution, the creation of a new government.